The original Doom trilogy as a franchise has seen many of the original games re-released to a lot of different platforms, with everything from official releases to consoles, both past and present, to less than official releases which have seen games running on everything from cameras to microwaves and everything in between. There's definitely been no shortage of ways to play Doom. But the majority of these games are effectively ports of the original title, with perhaps the only exception being Doom 64, which, while retaining the same overall control and gameplay elements from the original, delivered much more of a horror-focused game with a much greater focus on puzzles. That is, until September 2005, when developer Fountainhead Entertainment released Doom RPG to the world. And by world, I mean anyone who had a compatible Java or Brew-based mobile device and $10 to spare. Now, this was an interesting release for many reasons. Firstly, because this was an interesting time for the mobile gaming industry. While today there are two primary platforms for mobile gaming, iOS and Android, in the 2000s there was far more choice and plugins, with Symbian, Windows Mobile, Java, Brew, not to mention specific devices like the Nokia N-Gage, all contributing to a fairly dynamic mobile gaming market with varying levels of quality between cash grab and genuine entertainment. And secondly, Doom was a beloved franchise. Making the transition to a low-powered handheld was never going to be an easy task and would likely be judged harshly by fans of the franchise. Oh, and the other factor was when you release a game with the letters RPG in it, there's a general expectation of quite a different experience than a first-person shooter, which was what Doom was known for. So how did all of this translate in overall reception? Pretty good, actually. Mainstream media didn't often cover mobile gaming releases in the 2000s, but both IGN and GameSpot did review Doom RPG, awarding it a score of 9 and 8.6 respectively. IGN actually went as far to label it as a superbly playable mobile RPG. Now, my first time playing Doom RPG was actually on a Motorola Razr, and apart from remembering it having a lot of input lag, I remember it being a lot of fun. And after replaying it recently for this video, thanks to a community port for PC, it's still a lot of fun, thankfully without the input lag. Now, in terms of story, there is actually a pretty detailed story here, complete with a few twists and turns. With no real cutscenes outside of the very start of the game, most of the story is revealed by interacting with NPCs, as well as interacting with computer terminals, to read emails and other relevant information. And honestly, I have to compliment the writing here, to not only completely do away with any cutscenes, but to deliver text in a fairly concise manner while still delivering an engaging story is quite impressive. The actual narrative starts out all too familiar to anyone who has played any of the Doom games before. The player assumes the role of an unnamed Marine sent to a Martian Union Aerospace Corporation installation to investigate some strange happenings. It doesn't take long to realise that everything's gone to hell and the player must navigate through the base to work out exactly what's causing this demonic invasion and how to stop it. Before we continue, a massive thank you to those who support the channel. If you enjoy this type of content, please do consider liking the video or subscribing to the channel. With that out of the way, let's suit up, head back to Mars, and remember, Doom RPG. There are a lot of iconic things about the Doom franchise, but when I think about the Doom franchise, three things come to mind: Marines, demons, and the super shotgun. And the good news is, all of these things are in Doom RPG. Marines? Check. Demons? Check. Super shotgun? Check. This means that while it certainly doesn't feel like your average Doom adventure, it certainly feels like a Doom adventure. Heck, even the BFG 9K is here in all of its glory as one of the many nods to the game's heritage. The overall gameplay loop stays relatively true to the original Doom, with the player exploring various parts of the base, solving puzzles and engaging in combat with demons. The difference is that where this all takes place in real time in the original titles, in Doom RPG the game effectively plays out in turns. Well, at least the combat does. The actual traversal feels real time to me, but I'm certainly not the authority on RPGs or turn-based games, so your personal interpretation may vary. As well as the combat playing out in turns, each time you eliminate a demon you gain XP. Once you reach a predetermined level of XP, your character levels up, increasing your overall health and armor, as well as increasing 4 other attributes: defense, strength, agility, and accuracy. While the game does offer the ability to tackle some of the missions in a non-linear order, you'll quickly find out that if you enter a high-level enemy area without having increased the aforementioned attributes, you will quickly meet your demise, especially when you factor in some of the exploding enemy types, more on this later. As far as the actual attributes go, I never found a guide or anything which clearly explained it, but from my own interpretation, strength increases your rate of damage, defense reduces the amount of incoming damage, accuracy improves your accuracy, which is particularly relevant when engaging demons from range, and agility, I'll be honest, I actually have no idea what agility does in Doom RPG. Normally I'd associate it with movement speed, but given everything in combat is turn-based, I'm not so sure this is the case. Now, there is another way to increase these attributes outside of combat, as well as purchase medical supplies and ammo, and that's via shop terminals throughout the level, which allow you to exchange the game's currency, credits, for essential items. And hell, I really feel sorry for the Marine here. Not only has he been deployed to a knowingly hostile environment without so much as a weapon, but he needs to pay using his own credits for not only ammunition but for healthcare. No wonder he was the only available Marine to investigate. Now, if this game were made in modern times, of course you'd be able to use real cash to buy these items and become ridiculously overpowered and blitz through the game. But as it stands in Doom RPG, the majority of time you'll be using the shop to mostly supplement ammo for your favourite weapons, paid for by credits which can be found lying around the levels. Another thing which you'll find lying around the levels are the game's many weapons. First up you have the fire extinguisher, which does exactly what you would think it does and extinguishes fires that block the player's path. You can't shoot through or pass through these fires, making this an essential tool for navigating the base. Next up is the axe, which effectively serves two purposes. The first is as a weapon, which after having your attributes upgraded can actually one-shot a lot of enemies, and secondly as a tool to break down certain doors. Then you have the pistol, which is the only ranged weapon accessible for the first part of the game, and while relatively weak, does a good job of dispatching low-level enemies. Then you get access to the shotgun, which is as reliable as ever, dispatching lower-level foes with one shot. The chain gun makes an appearance, which basically serves as an automatic pistol damage-wise, and given they use the same ammo type, pretty much replaces all uses for the pistol once you get it. The super shotgun is here in all of its glory, and it sounds as satisfying as ever, with each shot really feeling and sounding impactful. There's also a rocket launcher, which really excels at taking out enemies from range, which is especially useful on enemies which explode when destroyed, which can take enormous chunks off your health if you're unlucky enough to be too close. The plasma rifle, despite not having a lot of ammo available, absolutely melts enemies at close range, but loses its effectiveness at range, making up close and personal the way to go. Last up on the weapon list is the BFG 9K, which pretty much one-shots anything at the expense of using a lot of the game's precious plasma ammo. Oh, and there is another weapon, or more an item, which is effectively a charm which enables you to capture any type of dog and use it as a melee weapon, while also shielding you against incoming damage. Overall, there's actually more weapons in Doom RPG than the original game, which is impressive given the limited scope on offer in a mobile game. Outside of the combat, there is a fairly heavy focus on the game's puzzles, and honestly, all of these are really creative and well thought out. There's a segment early on which requires you to hack a database to obtain some information required to proceed, only it becomes evident that you don't have the required skills to do so. What follows is a requirement to speak to a bunch of people and find another computer terminal which effectively educates you on how to interact with the database. With your newfound knowledge, you're able to return to the database and progress the game. The thing is, this isn't just a once-off puzzle. There are literally dozens of these puzzles throughout the game's roughly 6-hour playtime, and they all feel really well designed by people who had a genuine love for the source material. Overall, the game is remarkably well put together, and it's honestly difficult to find anything to critique about the game, given the confines of what the developers were working with. Perhaps the only thing worthy of critiquing is the fact that outside of its original Java and Brew release, it was never re-released for the more popular iOS and Android devices. Now, presentation on a mobile device was always going to be a case of making it look and sound the best with the resources available, and in my opinion, Doom RPG achieves this. Now, given the version being played for this video is the PC port, there are obviously some liberties being taken with how it looks and sounds, but I do remember the original wow factor back in the early 2000s, and despite it being a little rough around the edges when compared to the other Doom contemporary titles, it was and still is quite impressive. Graphically, the game is a very good recreation of the source material. I don't think there was ever a time in the game where I saw an enemy or something from an earlier version of Doom and didn't know what it was. While there isn't a lot of detail in the graphics, you have to remember that not only was this on a very small screen, but in 2005, phones didn't have access to high-speed data networks like 3G, meaning that the very act of downloading a game was often a lengthy experience in itself, and more detail would mean more, potentially costly, data. Sound design follows a similar trend to the graphics. It's not overly detailed or high fidelity, but what's here is good, including some callbacks to classic Doom tunes. Let's have a quick listen. Overall, like the gameplay, the presentation is very well put together, and even after all these years, still has a lot of unique charm to it. Doom is a series that I've always loved, and the original game not only holds the record for the most times I have rebought the same base game, but probably the most times I've ever completed a game. When I was younger and first played Doom RPG, while I enjoyed it, I realise now that I didn't appreciate it, at least not fully. Looking back 20 years later, I now realise what I was playing was an incredible achievement and certainly have found a new appreciation for it. Now, while Doom RPG was never released for iOS or Android, several years later in 2009, there was a sequel, appropriately named Doom 2 RPG, released for several mobile platforms, including iOS and BlackBerry, which effectively took all of the best parts of Doom RPG and added some new content while dramatically modernising the presentation. Like the original Doom RPG, this was also released to a strong reception. There was another Doom game released in 2009 exclusively for iOS devices called Doom Resurrection, which is basically an on-rail shooter, borrowing a lot of the ideas and aesthetics directly from Doom 3. I remember this looking quite good, but not playing as well as I had hoped, owing to the touch-based controls. The last Doom mobile game, at least at the time of recording this video, was released in 2023 simply called Mighty Doom, and is a top-down shooter using a cartoon art style. While I haven't personally played it, on the surface it doesn't look like something I would enjoy, but I'm always open to have my mind changed, and perhaps I do just need to play it. But that's enough from me. Do you agree or disagree with my opinions? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.